Hello, listeners and watchers. This is the Ground Up Show, and I'm doing something special now. If you haven't heard, I'm releasing the producer interviews for my series, Making Minimalism. So I have a series called Making Minimalism where I deconstructed what it took to make our documentary, Minimalism. It was an insane road. It was one of the hardest things I'd done, but also one of the most fulfilling. And I did interviews with Josh and Ryan from theminimalist.com, Jeff, Marla, and Dave from Spire. That's a media company. They do some pretty amazing stuff over there. So I kind of had these conversations with them, pretty informal, and I just wanted to get to the bottom and figure out how the hell we were able to do this and how the hell we were able to get on Netflix, because it's not something any of us had ever done before. It's not something any of us ever expected to, get any success out of. So I wanted to deconstruct and figure out how this was possible. So I'm releasing the full interviews, the extended interviews. It's about 2 hours or so of content with all my producers to people who review this podcast on iTunes. Reviews on the podcast are a really important way to get the word out about the show, to hopefully get it to a place where other people can hear from me and learn about my message, and also learn from the people that I'm sitting down with and talking to. So leave a review, take a screenshot, and send it to hello@mattdiavella.com. That's hello@mattdavella.com. And I really appreciate your support. It would be a huge help. And without further ado, this is episode 14 of The Ground Up Show. Today, I want to talk about money. My story, it really starts in college. I guess at 18 years old, I decided to go to college and not go to an in-state school. I decided to go to an out-of-state school, and with that, pay a lot of money to go to college. I started out at Bloomsburg University, eventually transferred to Temple University in Philadelphia. Both schools very expensive, unrealistically expensive. I was paying about $20,000 every year to go there. So yeah, it adds up. And then I did something very dumb my final year of college. This was the summer of 2010. I should have graduated in the spring, but I didn't take all my core requirements. So I had to stay after and take classes over the summer. And I kid you not, the classes that I took that summer were algebra and weightlifting. I didn't technically need to take weightlifting. That was, I just needed to take some kind of recreational course requirement. But I ended up spending $10,000 that summer. It was a massive mistake not to plan ahead of time and make sure I didn't make a mistake like that would lead me not only to delay me getting out and working and getting out of school, but also to take the burden of the extra money. So I graduated in 2010, eventually, with $95,000 in student loan debt. And I did the absolute smartest thing I could think of at the time. I bought a brand new car. So it wasn't anything fancy. It was a 2010 Kia Forte Coupe. I guess it was a little fancy. It was a 2-door. It was literally the car that was on the showroom floor. I remember going around with my dad and we were looking at different cars, and I was really against the Kia at the time because I was kind of caught up into brands and material trappings. And I was like, nah, I don't want to get a Kia. I was looking at Mazdas, which were super expensive and apparently I think pretty hard to maintain and fix up. I'm not a big car guy. I own a Kia. So then eventually we go back to this Kia dealership, and then I see this car, and it's on the dealership floor. And it's a 2010, and at this point we're kicking into 2011. And I was like, oh man, this car is pretty damn sweet. It's like it had music or lights that synced up with the music. It had nice rims. It had a fake leather interior. And for a Kia, it was a pretty damn nice car. I got to give them credit. They made a nice car. And then I bought it without really thinking about the consequences and thinking about, okay, this is going to be, $300 a month for the next 5 years. Not to mention the debt that I was in. So at this point, I'm about $115,000, give or take, in debt. And I didn't really want to think about it. I didn't want to look at it, focus it at it. I just wanted to, I kind of buried it in the back of my mind, but it always was there. Whether I wanted to ignore it or keep going, this was a weight that was on me, and that was holding me down and holding me back from doing what I really wanted to do. Because the sheer reality of the situation was that if I wanted to move out from my parents' basement, I was quite literally living in my parents' basement at this time. If I wanted to move out, I had to pay off that debt. That was the reality of the situation. I had, at that point, about $720 per month of loan payments, which is what I would be paying in rent if I was living in a city like Philadelphia. And I couldn't, there was no way I could do both, because at that time I wasn't making a lot of money. I was starting to build up my company and my freelance business, but I would have my regular projects was an event that I shot in Philly that was every other month, and I'd make $400. If you do the math, that's $200 a month, and not enough money to pay rent, let alone my student loan debt. So this was the story. This was my story. Was the guy that was in debt, and it was my story for a very long time. And I kind of there came a point when I had to take responsibility. And it was around the same time that I started to get into minimalism and self-development. I kind of, being somebody who was entrepreneurial in spirit, ran a freelance business, had to be self-motivated, I decided to really take responsibility for myself in every aspect of my life. And money was one of those big ones. So a couple of the books that I read early on, the first book that I read, if anybody is into personal development or personal finances, you've heard of Dave Ramsey. He's brilliant. He's he's got to be the biggest voice in the personal finance space. And he wrote a book called that's Ramit Sethi. He wrote a book called The Total Money Makeover. Another guy, Ramit Sethi, wrote I Will Teach You to Be Rich, also a pretty damn good book, countering philosophies there. But the Total Money Makeover was by Dave Ramsey was really a turning point for me, because it gave me a bit of a game plan. Now, the funny thing about you reading any book on personal finance when you're in debt is that you can only get through the first 3 chapters, because after the first 3 chapters, they start to get into specific details about what to do with money after you get out of debt, because getting out of debt is step 1 for the most part. So I remember reading these books back in the day in 2010, which is a long time ago now, thinking about it, 7 years ago. I remember thinking, man, I can't wait to pick this book up in 2-3 years when I get out of debt. I was pretty ambitious. I actually started a website called The 2-Year Payoff, which it died within a couple of months. My drive to get rid of my debt didn't die, but I didn't keep up posting on that blog. But that was my plan. I was like, let me just think of the craziest, most unrealistic goal imaginable. I want to pay off all my student loans in 2 years. And that's what I did. I didn't pay it off in 2 years, but that was my goal. And I think the biggest thing for me was creating the mindset. So now that I will say that the mindset really initiated when I plugged in all my personal finances, all my accounts into mint.com. So I put everything into mint.com, which is it's a website. I don't know if I would recommend it. Like it's not bad. Basically, you can upload all your accounts. There's advertising on there, so it can be a little bit annoying, and they're trying to sell you credit cards, which can be counterintuitive. But to plug everything in there and to see that my net worth was negative $115,000 was an eye-opening experience, to say the least. To see that I thought that I thought that I like was poor, but to know that your negative money and such a significant factor of negative money of negative $115,000, it felt insurmountable. I didn't think I could ever get out of it. But then I was like, fuck it, I can do this. And I'm kind of motivated by all these books that I'm reading and these blogs and people that are talking about this stuff. So I feel like I can actually do it. There's obviously a doubt in the back of my mind, like, dude, you totally can't do it. This is going to be impossible. But guided by the wisdom of others who have treaded this path before me, I just said, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try to pay off my debt in 2 years. And I started down this path. And the biggest thing was this mindset. So I created this mindset that, so I'm running a business. I'm starting to make some money, at the time, man, I would like to say I had a savings right when I moved home, but I had about $13 in the bank. I distinctly remember having $13 in the bank and then overdrafting on that and asking my mom for money. So I was really starting at ground zero. I had absolutely no money. But I remember thinking that I need to start developing some income, generating more business. And, even in my best months at that time, I probably got up to like $4,000 a month, maybe $5,000 a month. That was like if it was a really good month, which is amazing. And living at home, I have very little expenses. When I'm running my business at home, I wasn't hiring a lot of other people. So I was doing all of the work, but I was getting all of the reward. I was getting all the profit. I might have had a margin of like 95%, 90% of return. It's like I got to pay for camera gear and all this stuff, but most of the money I was keeping myself. But out of all that money that I was keeping, or at least temporarily bringing into my checking account, I didn't see it as my money. Every single dime I made, I was like, that's the bank's money. That's the bank's money. Every project I got, if it was a big project, I saw that as the bank's money. So money came in and I would save up quite a bit. I would save up, say, $15,000, $20,000 at a time over the course of a few months. And then I would take that as a lump sum, saving a little bit, a couple $1,000s to be safe. And then I would take the rest of that money and I would throw it towards my debt. And then just chip away at it. And so there's these two school of thoughts in terms of getting rid of debt. There's one that's strictly by the numbers, which is you're going to be paying off the highest interest loans. And then there's the snowball effect where you're paying off the smallest loans. So say if you have like a $1,000 credit card loan, you want to pay that off first because then it feels like a good win. It's more psychological. It's based upon how humans actually react. I did a little bit of a mix of both. So my biggest loan was about $27,000 from I forget, it was like American Education Services. And I figured like it was a 7% or 8% interest rate loan, which is pretty damn high. But I was like, just chipping away at that. It's going to take me forever to pay off that $25,000. And I'm not going to feel like, basically also what I wanted to do was reduce my monthly expenses. So I wanted to be able to move out. That was my goal, move out of my parents' house. If I can move out and if I can get rid of some of this burden of debt, I'll be in a good position. So I start to pay some of these smaller loans that equaled a higher monthly portion of my debt and of my expenses. So over time, 2 years I lived at home, I wasn't able to pay off all my debt, but I got to the point where I paid off probably about half, which was amazing because that's about $50,000 to $60,000. It's a lot of money to chip away at. But not only that, the $60,000 was great to get rid of, but my monthly burden was a lot less. So instead of $700 a month, I think I got to the point where I paid off my car when I moved out, and I had it was about $300 a month. So I'd significantly reduced the amount of monthly expenses. That way I could actually afford an apartment. But I was still focused on, all right, I got to pay off this debt. I need to get rid of this. So I continued for the next year and a half to 2 years. And it was in, I believe, 2014, 2015, where I finally paid off my final student loan debt. And I remember in the beginning when I initially started this journey of paying off my debt, I wrote, based on Adam Baker, he has a pretty great blog about personal finance, and he said, write a letter of forgiveness. Forgive yourself for this debt that you're in, because a lot of times our mindset is just to be guilty and to beat ourselves up about the position that we're in. But so I remember, I still have it here, but I don't know if it's on this computer. Let me see. I don't think so. I have no idea where it is, but I wrote a letter of forgiveness to myself and basically said, you know, this is not your fault. At 18 years old, you made a mistake to get into this amount of debt. At 24, 23, you made a mistake to buy a brand new car when you were already in debt. But now you're on the right path. Now you're on the path to actually clear and get rid of this debt. So I forgave myself for it. And I also proposed this as a challenge, and one of the greatest challenges that I would ever face in my life. And instead of being in debt for 30 to 40 years, which was a very likely scenario, I said, I want to pay this shit off in 2 to 3 years. I want to get rid of this so that I can have personal freedom. I can have the personal finance freedom to be able to do what I want, take the projects I want, do the jobs I want, which is the point where I'm at now, which is a pretty amazing transition point to be in. It's still terrifying. Like I'm maybe that's just part of my DNA, but it's always going to be scary, I think, when you're making these drastic changes in your life. But being debt free now, I can't tell you the feeling that I get. It's something that I have to constantly remind myself to be thankful for, that I'm no longer in debt, that I no longer have this burden weighing me down, that now I can really focus on more meaningful work, more meaningful projects. And I don't have to, if I don't want to do weddings, I don't have to. If I want to do them, I could. If I don't want to do bar mitzvah videos, client work at all, I don't have to do it. I don't have to work for money. Money is not my main driving factor. Which is kind of an interesting dichotomy if you think about it, because money was a driving factor for me for a very long time. I guess it was, if you look deeper, it was the freedom, but it was, I want to make money so then I can get out of debt, and then I don't have to focus on making money as a sole source of what I'm doing. So that's in part my money story. And I got to tell you, for anybody who's on this path to get out of debt, to reduce the financial burden on themselves, it's worth it, and you can do it. And even if right now it doesn't seem like it's possible, you have to start. Because if I didn't start then in 2010, when would I have started? When I started to make a little bit more money, is that when I would have turned things around? I don't think so. I think that there would have been no line to be drawn to when I start paying off my debt and when I just spend this money frivolously. Brings me to another point, that you do have to enjoy the process, and you do have to enjoy... There we go. You do have to enjoy the process, and you do have to enjoy some of the money that you're making. You're working to to meet your basic expenses, to pay off your rent and your debt and all that. But at the same time, you need to actually enjoy it and go out and have fun, and don't be totally frigid with your money. And every once in a while, treat yourself. I usually, if I land a big project, or if I complete a big project and the client loves it, I'll leave that as an excuse to go out to a nice dinner or buy a nice bottle of whiskey or scotch. There are certain things where you do need to treat yourself, because at the end of the day, if you're busting your ass and making a lot of money, and you're not actually enjoying it, then what's the point? It's not worth it. So some of my recommendations, I mentioned them a little bit earlier in the podcast about books, but I 100% I recommend, if you haven't read it, Dave Ramsey's The Total Money Makeover is a game changer. It's got some religious aspects to it, religious undertone at times. I'm not a religious guy, but totally, if you're not religious yourself, it's still completely an enjoyable book and also motivating. So there's stories throughout of people who themselves have gotten out of debt and who are on the journey to pay off their debt. And so it's a progressive story. There's people pretty much across every aspect of their personal finance goals. So people that have paid off a couple $1,000s, people who've paid off $100,000. So it's nice to be able to see people at different points of progression. Check that book out. Ramit Sethi, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. So I mentioned that book is fantastic. Ramit is a genius. He's very intelligent and has he's the kind of guy who would tell you different advice from Dave Ramsey. So he'll tell you, don't pinch pennies, don't sacrifice on the latte every day. The $3 latte that you spend every day isn't going to add up to a whole lot in over the course of your life. It's not going to be the biggest way for you to save money and to pay off your debt. He says go for the big wins. So the big wins is reducing the interest rate on your home if you're going to buy a home, or maybe don't buy a home. Maybe just rent and save money that way. Like, weighing the pros and cons of that decision, I think, is very important. A lot of people just enter into these things because they think that's what they're supposed to do. Weddings are super expensive. In what ways could you reduce the cost of your wedding? Maybe don't get married. No, seriously, I don't know. You make that decision for yourself. What else? A car, like car payments, incredibly expensive. Get a used car, get a reliable car, drive it to the freaking ground. These are ways in which you can really maximize your savings. So with a house, if you save a couple interest points, that's tens of thousands of dollars. You're not going to be able to save that money by skipping the latte every once in a while. So Ramit Sethi, he's really good. He'll also encourage you that if you're responsible, you can own a credit card. Dave Ramsey will tell you not to own a credit card at all. Cut them all up, never use them. And I know people who want both schools of thoughts, and originally I was on Dave Ramsey's side, and I was like, I don't need a credit card. I'm just going to cut it up, get rid of it. And then once I got out of debt, I decided, you know what, having a credit card, I have a lot of business expenses. I'm spending tens of thousands of dollars on camera gear. I think that this could benefit me to have a credit card to, if down the road I want to buy a house, if Natalie wants to buy a house, that this is something that is now an option because I've built up good credit. It's a bullshit system that you need to show that you're, just the whole credit score system is entirely made up of dog shit, but it's just part of the game. Sometimes you got to play the game. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm playing the game, and I get some points for travel and that stuff. So we're going to Miami in a couple of weeks for fun. These are things that you can do for free too, because I'm paying through points. So these are some of the things that come in when you have a credit card. But of course, if you're not responsible, if you don't trust yourself, cut up your credit card, don't use it. Tony Robbins has been getting really into personal finance lately. He's got 2 books. The most recent one and the most approachable is Unshakable. And that's a book that I'm halfway through right now. And the thing that I'll leave you on is that personal finance is a journey, and it's something that you need to continually work at. And it's something that you need to continually put yourself into the right mindset. So every single year I read, without fail, I will read a book on personal finance. So whether it's Dave Ramsey, Ramit Sethi, or Tony Robbins, I will reread. I've reread Dave Ramsey's book maybe 3 or 4 times because to put yourself in that mindset, to understand why you're doing this, to understand the kind of freedom that you're pursuing and continue to pursue, and to understand what's important. And is it important to get the new iPhone, or is it important perhaps to put that money towards your 401k and your retirement, and to have that security down the road, which is going to feel better to you. So I do this every single year, and I encourage you guys to do the same. Read a book on personal finance. I say start with Dave Ramsey, but you can read any of them. Tony Robbins is great. Ramit Sethi's great. And that's it. So that's my money story. I'd love to hear from you guys, to hear what your money story is. If you could leave a comment on this YouTube video, or if you shoot an email to hello@mattdiavella.com. Those are two great ways to tell me about your money story, and also ask any questions about personal finance, and maybe I can give you guys some advice based upon my journey. Thanks for watching.